Hi everyone. I'm back here with Rob Henderson, and we are going to talk about Succession up to every episode, but the last episode. Right? There's 10 episodes in season 4. We've just finished episode 9, called Church and State. It's Logan's funeral. That's most of the episode. Um, so yeah, I mean, we should probably just get caught up on this whole thing and where it's been going. Our conversations basically around Succession. It's basically been me saying the last few times we've talked that the real world is going to intrude on their sort of, on their reality, right? They have
Mm,
like these, they sort of feel like they're in charge. They are the ones sort of, they're shaping public opinion. They're, sending the country in one direction or next. And then Logan dies and they sort of unleash these forces that they can't contain, or maybe they can contain them, but they've made some like bad decisions along the way. Um, and there was a Ross Douthat piece before this last episode, after episode 8, in which he sort of made the opposite argument. He said that the public opinion and mass public is sort of missing from Succession. Like
mm.
basically, the elites are too powerful, and public opinion isn't really doing much. And my opinion is, I think he's right, like halfway. I think what I've come to the conclusion is that like Logan, it was like elites can control the masses if they're competent. And so Logan was there, and basically they could keep a lid on this Menkin guy, and they could basically control the sort of the future of the Republican Party. Right? Logan dies, it all goes to hell. Right? It's these
Mm.
kids who are not serious people, as he told them, I think, in their
Uh,
last conversation, and they can't
mm.
and they can't control it. So I think that there's been confirmation for this view. Rob, you seem doubtful, so you tell me. So what's your take on this?
Well, so I think like both of so I yeah, Douthat wrote an interesting piece, but yeah, that the masses are missing as a character, and partially because like if you're gonna dramatize a story, it's just hard to like have like the masses be a character the way that you could have like a group of interesting elites be characters in a show and follow their stories. But your point, I think I mean your prediction was right that suddenly, right, like the real world did kind of intrude, but the Roy kids sort of summoned it, and they helped to usher it in, right? Like in the eighth episode, the one before this most recent one, it was like an interesting, like the show did a great job of like integrating like the characters' motivations with this outcome, right? Everyone has their own angle, everyone has their own agenda, and they sort of not accidentally, but just sort of mixtures of like self-interest and forces beyond their control led to them calling Menkin as the winner, perhaps prematurely. Um, but I don't know if like things are getting out of control because Logan isn't there. Like I don't know that like if Logan was alive during election night, this most the eighth episode during election night. I mean, do you doubt that they would have called Mencken?
They had this. This was part of the debate. What would Dad would have done? And then
Yeah,
Shiv and Rome have this exact debate. And Rome says, of course, he wants to say Dad would have done what I want to do, which is called for Mencken.
yeah,
And Shiv is like, no, he understood sort of the. He sort of understood the importance of stability. So I don't know.
mm,
Maybe he would have been a more shrewder sort of operator. He could see where public opinion is. He could see that like it's overreaching to like call a presidential election on that basis. So I don't know
mm.
either. Like I think maybe like the argument for this view is that either he wouldn't have made that call, or he would have somehow done it in a more competent way, or somehow more logical way, and it wouldn't have sort of exploded on everyone. I think that's what you'd have to think.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit unclear. I guess like yeah, maybe Logan would have waited a bit longer or like found a way to restore confidence in the election or something along these
Logan wouldn't
lines.
have been in that situation in the first place because the problem with these kids was they needed Mencken to win because they needed
Oh yeah, yeah.
to kill the deal. So
To,
Logan
ki- to
wouldn't have
kill
been
the
as
good.
wish washy as that. As, well, they're not wish washy. They just didn't want the deal because it was Logan's
Yeah,
deal. But right, he would have made
yeah.
a decision. He would have had control, so he wouldn't have been in this sort of desperate situation.
Right. That's true. Yeah, so he wouldn't have had to put pressure to call the election prematurely anyway. But in terms of like whether Mencken would have ultimately been elected or like called, if the election would have been called for him. I don't know that like if Logan had been around or not, if that would have made a big difference. I mean the show is interesting. Like you and I kind of DM'd a bit about this, about like the Menkin character to me is like I still don't like it. The show tries to make him seem menacing, and they try to make him seem like, oh, like he's a republic ending character. I read some articles about like critics, TV critics calling him a Nazi, and I'm like, I can see like some of the insinuations that he makes, and like his bizarre victory speech about how he wanted things to be clean, and about the cunning men making these kind of illicit trades. And
Not
so
about the
whatever, like
cunning men, not the
yeah,
cunning men. I see what, like he's against
yeah,
that. It's pure
yeah,
fault.
you're right. He's whatever, like maybe arguably dog whistles. But I don't know. He just doesn't strike me as like a scary person. I don't know. Is this going to be like the fact that they called this election too early really going to like change the country? Is it going to actually intrude on the Roy kids' lives? I guess in a way, maybe this latest episode, obviously going to be full of spoilers. Rome, like they like, is it their fault that there are protests across the country now, or not? I
Yeah,
don't
well,
know if
yes,
like
it's obviously their fault. I mean, it's
is
obviously
it
their
their
fault.
fault
And that's
because
the
they
only
called the
reason.
election early?
Yeah.
Like, are they protesting because the election was called early, or because Mencken won? You
Well, we don't
know?
know Menkin won, right? We know that
Yeah.
like ATN is the only source I think that called Menkin won, and so that's what made it all disputed. I don't think the other media called it, so that's
Oh,
disputed. That's
have they?
disputed.
Is that right? Have they not
Yeah, yeah,
officially? So
yeah, yeah.
is
Well,
Mencken the
they don't say,
president elect or not?
they don't say this explicitly, but no, because
Yeah.
this is like the day after the election, right? It's a
Yeah.
day or a day or two.
Because
I
they're
think
they're
it's the next
acting
day.
as if Mencken is the president. Like all the
Well,
Roy
no,
kids.
they're still saying well they are. I mean, he's like probably seems like the most likely president, but like he comes in
Yeah.
and they're still saying, oh, it's going to be a knife fight. Like somebody mentions it during the episode, so they see
Uh,
this as like going to the Supreme Court or whatever. This is going to be a big
yeah.
legal battle.
Was
Um,
this? Do you think like one thing that came to mind when I was watching that episode and the fallout from it is like, is this supposed to be in any way inspired by the 2020 election and how
well,
that,
yeah,
like
I
how
mean,
prolonged it was?
you're asking that, yeah.
Do you, but like there weren't like I guess like is it supposed to be like a mirror image of it? Because I mean, I guess like all of the networks, like what was weird is that like Fox called Arizona for Trump
Yeah,
very early. There was a piece in the New York Times that said that they actually called it too early, which was
yeah,
interesting, right? Like they sort of condemned Fox News, which is not
mm,
surprising, but for calling
yeah,
the election prematurely for Biden.
right.
Um, and then there were all these lawsuits and so on. And so, but in this case, it was, I guess, supposed to be the reverse, that this time the Republican won, and now there's like a question about um, the credibility, the legitimacy of the democratic system. There are protests across the country. Is there going to be like a storming of the Capitol uh,
Well, it's not
when
supposed to be. Yeah,
like
go
when
please.
Mencken wins? Or is like Antifa going to storm the Capitol when
I think the
Mencken?
point is, yeah, I think the
Yeah.
point is, okay, here's the 2020 connection. It's not the exact you're looking for. Like, okay, it's like the news network has a effect of calling it like that. So it's not the exact
Mm-hmm.
same situation, but it's like you have this right wing populism that
Mm-hmm.
is that doesn't care about like the rules, like how things are supposed to. So it's like Trump, like this Mencken thing and the Trump thing. It's not the exact same thing. Trump is president and they storm the Capitol and whatever. This is Mencken. He's jumping the gun. Like before, like there's like an actual reason to call the election. They do call the election. Now they call the election based on a judgment call, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
actually not that. It's not necessarily wrong. I don't think that the decision is necessarily wrong here. It's more ambiguous, and it's like they benefit because of right wing violence. Like the right wing people they burn the ballots in Milwaukee.
Well, we don't know that, Richard.
Well, we don't know.
That was
Yes,
never
yes, could be
confirmed.
anybody. Yeah, okay,
Yeah. I
right.
mean,
And so we don't.
okay, so
Well,
that like the burning down of the voting center, I think like that's, to me, that's ambiguous. Like, okay, I get
how
that.
could
Like,
that be
okay,
ambiguous?
it's in a blue city, right? Like most of the ballots burned are going to be Democrat voters. So like, I guess logically it makes sense that it would be right wing people burning it down. But then like in the real world, like how frequently do right wing demonstrators burn things down? Does that happen?
Rarely. I mean, rare,
I mean,
clearly, very, very rarely.
okay,
Yes.
in the real world, you know
Yeah.
nothing about like, you just hear that a voting center was burned to the ground. Do you immediately think, oh, those must have been right wingers, or do you think maybe another? I don't know. Like
No,
that was
and
that
you
was
know
a
what?
bit of a
And the other thing,
stretch.
and you're right. And the other, well, I mean, yeah, this is sort of like the political tilt of the show, right? Of course, yeah, I think you're right. And then the end, like how polite the left wing protesters are to like Roman, like they just keep like knocking him down by accident, and he's just like provoking them, and they're trying to help him up. You know, they're just very nice people. They
One
don't
guy
notice.
tried to help him stand up. Did you see that? Like one
Yeah,
guy
yeah. And
tried
then
to
Rome
help him
like
get up
chased him,
and
like,
was
get
just
the
like,
F out
"Don't
of here.
touch
Right.
me."
Yeah,
Don't.
yeah.
I was like, dude, like this, like no, no, no. In reality, right? Like this guy would have been mowed to the ground. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean
So
they bang on the limousine a little
the
bit,
limo,
right?
yeah.
They don't want to hit. I mean, I'm sure if you go to leftist parts, most people are probably not going to try to beat you up, right? Most, so maybe that's not that crazy. Um,
I mean, a guy in a suit provoking like those kinds of people
yeah, yeah, you're
in
right.
I
Yeah,
don't
I think.
know.
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
yeah,
I agree that
he's
like
famous. Yeah,
most people would yeah, but a few would
but
like
he's and Rome is famous, and he's got a distinct voice, and I was surprised like nobody like sort of even in that darkness, I'm surprised like nobody sort of like realized who he might be. They must
yeah,
have known the
or just a
funeral was
sucker
close by.
punch for fun running by. Like
Yeah,
even me, like if I'm in that situation at 18 years old and I just see, like no one's gonna catch you, you could just walk by, knock this guy in the jaw and keep going. Like I probably would have done it. Like
is that what you would see?
like
Is that what you were
oh,
like, Rob, at
sure.
18? If
Oh
you
yeah, I
could get away
was.
with a sucker punch, you'd do
Yeah,
it.
if you yeah, why not? Like if you're drunk and stoned and you're in a crowd, like why yeah, of
If
course.
someone's
Yeah.
fighting with you, I hope you're saying not random people, not
Oh
knockout
yeah, yeah.
victims.
If someone's
You.
like, like coming at me, right? Like you're running past them
Okay.
and he's like screaming up insults and obscenities at you
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you're
Okay.
like in that kind of mind space, like, yeah, why
I
not
thought you
just
were
like
just a
knock him to the
knockout
ground?
game guy. I thought you just went around
Oh
clubbing people on the streets.
no, 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 no. Like some like, some guy like that. Yeah. I mean, even today you don't get those impulses. Okay, maybe not. Maybe it's
I
just me.
just,
But
yeah.
like,
No, I get it. Yeah,
that was to me like a very unrealistic. I was waiting for it. I was like, this is
yeah.
actually what I was like, oh, Richard's right. Like this is when reality is going to come
Yeah, I thought they
crashing
might kill. I
in.
thought they might kill him or something. I thought
I
that would have been like a
didn't
very ironic sort of ending for Rome.
or like, they attack him and then the police interfere and shoot one of the protesters and then it becomes a media circus. No, 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 that was like a surprisingly mild mild treatment of Roman in that
Yeah,
situation. So
yeah. So
yeah, I don't know what they were
yeah,
going for there.
the world intrudes on that comes on their death funeral. But then you see the escalation of the Kendall thing, where
Mm.
his kids are going upstate. They're going to miss their grandpa's funeral, right? So this is clearly an unintended consequence of the Menkin decision. His black secretary like leaves, and it's he tells her it's because of Menkin. She's like, yeah. So it's sort of like it's giving you this little like subtle like clues of like everyone who's a person of color, including his secretary. What's that girl's name? Do you remember?
Oh, something with a K. Oh, this is
Yeah,
sad. We should know it, but yeah, yeah.
yeah. So she's leaving, and then like the other non-white person in their life, his daughter, for some reason, again that we don't know, and they keep mentioning she's scared. Like they're not trying to tell us they're telling us she's non-white. They never tell us why. The critics are not interested in why. It's a very strange thing, but like it's part of the story now, and it's like really strange. Like nobody is like
She
questioning it
was
or wondering about
adopted, right? She was. I figured. Well, wasn't there?
it.
There was
Probably,
some
but
comment, at least one comment in the show about how like Logan didn't like her or like would ignore her, the adoptive daughter,
yeah,
and
I
like I
think
guess
that
it's
was I thought,
implied
yeah. Yeah,
that
and
Logan
so
was like, "Why did you
why did they
adopt
have
this?"
so
Yeah.
they could have a biological child. So why did they adopt? I mean, we need like some story here. I think that
Yeah.
makes it that explains
Well,
why.
is she the oldest? I mean, it could have been a case of like they tried, thought that like they couldn't conceive and
Yeah,
adopted, and then later had a kid. This happens sometimes. I mean,
yeah,
Rava seems, whatever. Like if yeah, she may be a little bit older, right? She was probably older than 30 when she had her first kid, so maybe there was some question about fertility. I don't
yeah.
know, but you're
Anyways, yeah,
right that
we're
like they
making
haven't
this up, but this.
explicitly described like
Well, I
why
mean,
did they
one
adopt
thing
this girl.
yeah, one thing I said earlier was like this is sort of like the point of the show. Like they don't pay attention to the children, and so it's like
Hmm.
this child is just Indian like randomly, and like nobody even mentions it. So it's sort of like it's keeping with like how like neglectful these people are towards children.
Right.
Um, the real world, and so that's the real world intruding in on, and I think that like there's so much that's interesting. The Menkin thing. I sort of saw a little bit more of his appeal this episode, like the season when he gave his speech. I still don't think he's the kind of candidate who could win a presidential election. Like, he seems like he would be like a writer for like one of these weird like Catholic traditionalist like magazines or something.
First
Yeah,
things.
yeah, he seems like maybe a first things author or something. He has, but that stuff
Uh,
doesn't sell. I mean, that doesn't sell as far as politicians go. I don't know if he's even
Well,
supposed to
dude,
be
like
Catholic.
I recently rewatched this clip on YouTube of Menkin from season 3 last season. I think it was the first season we ever see Menkin, and Shiv, she
Yeah,
kind of insults him. She's like, "Oh yeah, here you go with your like aristopopulism BS," and he responds to her. He's like, "Have you read Plato?" And then he goes on to say like ATN is like not serious. Like Menkin starts insulting ATN and says that he calls it a pudding pop for the nursing home, right? Like
yeah,
he says, no one I know cares about ATN anymore. He's like, and he says something like, all due respect to Logan Roy, like no one cares about ATN anymore. And so he is kind of like this very online, like, like if you talk to like a lot of young people on the right today, like, especially now that Tucker Carlson's gone, Fox News is like not taken seriously as an outlet.
yeah,
And so I think he is kind of that guy, but for me, like just aesthetically, it doesn't make sense. I'm
yeah.
surprised you haven't commented on this yet. That like Mick is just too like lean, right? Like he's too live. If you're gonna be a real populist, you gotta have some heft. I think you gotta be like a
Well, look,
DeSantis or
there's
Trump. Like
yeah. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing that's interesting. And so, like the populist, the dissident right has sort of these two wings, and they sort of pretend like we pretend like these two wings don't exist. But there is a Nietzschean thing, and there is a like a Christian thing, right? And there's
hmm
the Bronze Age pervert Nietzschean thing, and there's a Catholic. And I have like full disclosure, I am more sympathetic towards the secular wing of this. And I'm not sure which one Mencken is supposed to be. Now, so is he really populist, right? And then you do have, you also have this populist like Trump is thing, or like revival, Baptist tent, meeting thing, right? Which is actually probably electorally the only like the realist of those things, like the Nietzschean stuff and the Catholic traditional stuff. That is not electorally popular. You do have the Baptist revival tent. There is like a base for that, and a lot of politicians do fit into that. That's like organic in American culture. So Mencken is clearly not that. He's clearly not the populist revival tent. Trump is not from this world, but he just fits with it. I mean, these people just love him, and so Mencken, is he like this Nietzschean, or is he this like Catholic? And I don't know. It's not clear. He's supposed to be, I think, an agglomeration of the two. But it's very interesting, right? It's very interesting, like what he's supposed to be, or like even if is he supposed to be like the 2015 alt right? Do you remember the 2015, 2016 alt right? Like these guys in
like the
suits who are
Richard
like,
Spencer types, like those
yeah.
guys.
Is he supposed to be
Uh,
like a version of that, or is he supposed to be like more of these Catholic guys? And those
where are
types
you
are
getting the
like,
Catholic from? Like I don't did
oh,
has he
just because
mentioned
most
religion?
weirdos today who talk about who talk about like common good and like moving beyond like individualism, those are all Catholic. So maybe
Oh,
there's
like the
maybe this that doesn't even exist.
communitarian.
Yeah, maybe that doesn't even exist in this world, right? Maybe that doesn't even
Okay.
exist in this world. So
I
maybe
mean, well, I
I'm
think like
projecting it
they,
out
they,
there.
they do seem to be like the writers and the show they do seem to be very aware of like the different strands of conservative thought, right? Like wasn't there a scene where I forgot the character, but they were like, oh, he's a neocon pretending to be a
Yeah,
paleocon who's
yeah. I
secretly
think that guy was supposed
libertarian.
to be Marco Rubio. There was supposed to be like this senator who was like a Hispanic, and he was just like a neocon. So I think it's like a Rubio or somebody like that.
Yeah, so they have these, and then yeah, yeah. So they have they're aware of these different strands. I think when we first met Mencken, I remember reading like reviews and people suggesting that he was supposed to be a like a variation of Jordan Peterson. I guess Peterson
No,
is like
no, no,
like
no.
kind of a like no the season 3 version of Mencken, well, because they kept Shiv called him like like mentioned the red pill describing him, and I
Yeah, but
think like a
that's
lot of
all
people.
dissident right. All far right people talk about red pill. Yeah,
Yeah, and he was supposed to be like more intellectual. I think now I don't know, they've changed his character
his
slightly from
mannerisms actually.
last.
Peterson, his
Yeah.
mannerisms do remind me of Peterson, though.
Right.
You're
And
right.
he's very
Not about
lean, right? He has white hair, he's very lean, he's tall, he's skinny. But like in terms of like Mencken, I just don't see him as like a populist. Like I don't see him having appeal to middle America, right? Like Trump, it's very clear. DeSantis, you can kind of see it just like in terms of the visual aesthetics. Like you see that guy and you're like, it makes sense that like he would, he'd win Ohio and Wisconsin, whatever.
yeah.
Mencken, it's like, no. He's like he would appeal to like a niche subsection of maybe like the Nietzschean right, the way that he talks, the way that he
Yeah.
moves. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe he's on the all meat
you're right, and
diet.
this is I think where Douthat has the strongest point, because it's like, ATN crowned this guy, and like this guy who has like no mass appeal somehow just became the nominee because ATN said so. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Weird things can happen in primaries, but if he did get through the primary, like weird, who knows what can happen. Like Jimenez, I think is supposed to be like a Hispanic moderate, like generic candidate. Like he seems like the kind of candidate. Jimenez seems like the kind of candidate who would have done well. Now he did take that Bernie Sanders guy Gill as his vice president, apparently,
Oh, he
and so that
did.
might have,
Oh, I didn't
yeah,
realize.
that might
Okay.
have been, yeah. Well, that's why they were talking to that guy,
Okay.
Shiv's old boyfriend, because that's why Gill is on the
Oh,
ticket.
yeah.
I
Right.
think I
Right.
think that's what's going on.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's what's
Interesting.
going on, and
Okay. So he brought like a socialist on the ticket with
so
him, which
maybe, yeah,
may have
maybe that
been
opened up a path for Menkin,
right.
maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
that would have been done just enough to maybe turn off some swing
yeah.
voters.
But this is a bit like, I will say that like this is like a little bit nitpicky, because you're we sophisticated observers can like find these like sort of flaws in the story, but I think generally it's like it's very hard to do this, to like just do something this close to contemporary politics and not make it like super preachy or super cringe, but make
Mm.
it somewhat realistic. Like not just say, "Oh no, that's impossible, never happened." Like everything here is like, sort of possible. Ballots burned out
Oh,
in
sure. Yeah,
Milwaukee.
yeah.
Okay, yeah,
We're probably being a bit nitpicky.
yeah,
I mean, I think I like, I just every time I see Mencken, I'm like, yeah, I don't buy that he
yeah.
could be elected, or even that like Republican I think the Republican Party has changed. Like maybe in like 2012, like the Romney era, like maybe, but today the Republican Party
Yeah,
is so
Nietzsche and
different.
Romney.
It's not.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well. I mean, if you read, I don't know if you've read, what is it, Bronze Age Mindset? There's a very lengthy excerpts about Mitt Romney in that book. Um,
yeah, yeah.
but but yeah, so 10, 12 years ago, maybe like a Mencken-esque character, like the way that he looks,
No,
could
no,
have
no.
won, but
10, 12
now,
years ago,
yeah,
Romney had to be Romney. He had to be sort of
yeah,
he didn't dabble in like the far right ideas, right, or anything like that. There's a
yeah.
problem with being, very online and sort of being a little bit edgy on these. Although they don't really show him being edgy on like race questions. He quotes Hitler once, and
Oh, did he
he
quote
tells.
Hitler?
Well, he
Oh, no,
said
no,
H.
he.
Remember?
Oh, did he? Oh, I don't
Yeah,
remember
remember he
this.
goes, no, no, this was severe. I'm surprised you don't remember this, because the first time him and Rome are hanging out in the bathroom, he goes,
Okay,
I get ideas from like whoever, like this guy, or H if he has good ideas. And
oh,
like
yeah,
Rome's like,
yeah, yeah.
H, oh, that was a
Well,
bad
he
guy.
refers to I paused because he refers to, in the most recent episode, refers to Shiv as what is it, like Kinderkuchenkirche, and
Yeah, yeah,
apparently this was like a German, it originated a German phrase of like children kitchen, children home kitchen, something along those lines. Like
yeah,
the like roughly translates to like barefoot and pregnant would be like the way that we would describe
yeah.
it in English. And this was like a German phrase during World War I and
Yeah,
World War II
yeah. See,
about
this
like
is
the
the scary
woman's
thing. Oh,
home.
and then
Yeah.
Ravenhead. Yeah, yeah. This is 2015 alt right. Okay, now that I think about it more, yes, because there's these ironic appeals to Nazi Germany.
Mm.
There's Ravenhead. He named his dog Blondie, right, and then said, "Oh, it's a spelling error." So he's like literally
But
a
yeah,
Nazi in
and
his personal life.
didn't
He got
Tom ask
married at
him
the
like, oh,
Berghoffs, right?
you read my, what did he said, he read Mein Kampf twice, and Tom was like, were there some Easter eggs you didn't get the first time? Yeah,
So
but
yes, you're right. This is actually a little bit dated, right? Because it
yeah,
is like this 2015, which I don't think exists. I think Trump sort of swallowed this whole thing, and it's just like you have the religious stuff and you have the popular stuff. You have Bronze Age pervert, but you don't. I think this stuff is really the sort of racialist, sort of aristocratic Nietzschean sort of view. I think that's sort of fallen out of, or at least it never went anywhere in Republican politics. It's
well,
probably just
not
too.
in electoral politics, right? Like, I just don't like, you can't get a lot. You can build a very popular Twitter account and maybe get like a perch on like some like,
I don't even see much of
interesting.
that. I see Bronze Age
Yeah,
pervert, but I don't see many influencers. Like there doesn't seem to, that space does not seem to
yeah.
be like a wide market. Like there's not
Right.
many
Whereas,
people there.
but then you look at like, I guess, yeah, if you look at Trump himself, like Trump, like
Trump is, yeah,
he
Trump
hasn't
is a
read any of
subject.
this stuff. Like he's
Yeah.
not, he did, like we discovered that Logan Roy was a fan of Oswald Spengler. Like I don't know, Trump isn't reading Spengler. He's not reading any of this stuff. Like Trump was. He was a unique character, but he's like, I think they in a way they like wrote Mencken to be like like the online right come to life in a way, you know,
Yeah.
like and if he could have gotten elected. So it's
So like maybe like
I don't
Blake Masters. It might be
yeah.
like a Blake. But you saw what happened
Uh,
electorally to Blake Masters. I saw one quote in one story was like the worst focus group politician of all time. Like some
oh
observers said, right?
really?
Yeah,
Huh,
when you come out as
interesting.
an online right guy, yeah, that doesn't work too well.
Whereas, so the other teal,
Vance,
yeah, Vance, which
yeah,
Vance is like a plausible politician, right? Like the way he
yeah,
looks, the way he talks, the way he carries himself, right? It just comes like the emotional feeling you get watching him is very different than when you watch Blake Masters. And
yeah,
so like, you know, if Menkin, you know, just looked and spoke differently than he does, he speaks like an elitist, right? Like, do we know like where Menkin went to college, what his background is, like, you know,
yeah.
yeah, I just yeah,
I would assume he probably went to a good college. I mean, I would assume he's
yeah,
probably like elite intellectually.
very elite credentials, right?
Yeah, I've been meaning to write about this, and so people who are listening to this are probably going to preview. I think there are such contradictions between the populist slash Nietzsche stuff, right? There's such a contradiction there, and I want to sort of like flesh those out. So that's like a little. I haven't seen anyone do that, so that's like a project for me, and it's
Populist
interesting
versus
because
Nietzschean, interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like
Well, those are very distinct.
you have like this dissented right thing where it's like when the you have this dissenting thing where it's like, oh, Nietzsche, Brown, Bap, Trump, like it's about superior people, inferior people, and then it's like, oh, these poor left behind, morbidly obese people in West Virginia who just can't get a break and are being, stomped on by
Oh
the
no.
elites, right? And like you have both of these things like together, and they supposedly go together, but they really don't. And it's
Yeah.
sort of
Well,
like interesting to explore
don't
that.
some of the Nietzschean disciples, isn't the idea, like I haven't read that much Nietzsche to be honest, so I don't really know, but like isn't the idea of like you should have like a worthy elite, right? Like you should have like a very like a vetted leadership class that should have like the best interests of the people in
Yeah,
mind. So it's not so much that like, you know, whatever, like they're not trying to like raise up the ordinary people and like give them more political power, more political will. It's more so that like, you know, we need better elites to like to shepherd these people, to take care of them, and our current elites are like, you know, vampires like exploiting their own
yeah.
country kind of thing. I think that's the, at least that's like some of the, you know, the discussion that I've heard among like the more sort of dissident Nietzschean right.
Yeah, but they do throw. I mean, electorally, when it comes down to it, they always do end up sort of throwing with the masses and sort of just and sort of like
Yeah.
complimenting the masses and saying that they're like they have some secret wisdom like to them, right? So
Okay.
there's sort of
That's
there's this
true.
guy
Yeah.
Darren Beatty who I know who works for Revolver, and he's like, America is like, he just always writes stuff like this. He tweeted like, America is like a fat, like ugly, stupid nation or something, like it's become like a fat, ugly, like whatever, something's very negative, right? And I responded, who's not fat or stupid? Whites in urban areas. Maybe we should try to learn from them, right? And then he
Yeah.
responded to me, and it's sort of like, you hate fat people and you hate stupid people, but like urban whites are like your biggest enemy, like the least fat, the least stupid people in America. And so there is like a real
Yeah.
contradiction here.
There is, yeah, that is interesting. That's a good point. Yeah, I wonder well, the thing is, like a lot of the like it's a sort of a counter elite movement, right? Because a lot of the dissident right, they are those people, right? Like they went to this like they went to the same schools as the urban white people. They have like relatively low BMIs, like the urban
Yeah,
white people. Like they have like physically and in terms of their resume, there's a lot of overlap, but it's just ideologically they detest them, and they're kind of what hoping to like win social and electoral power by appealing to the masses in order
yeah.
to, you know, overcome
Yeah, there's more to say. Yeah,
their
I should probably.
adversaries.
Yeah, I should
But
flesh this. Yeah,
this is
there's
yeah
more.
this is
There's
a
so
this
much.
is worth writing about. Yeah, I'll be
Yeah,
curious to see where you go with this.
there's much more that could be said. But yeah, so Mencken is sort of okay. So yeah, it's interesting to sort of understand Mencken in that context. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we generally share the same idea that he would not be very electable. It is sort of a mystery. You see what the writers are trying to do. Um, but yeah, I think this was sort of a miss. Um,
On Ross Douthat's piece, which I really yeah, I thought it was very thoughtful. What I think like one thing that came to mind when I was reading that after you sent it was that like a lot of these, you know, because he like the idea that like, oh, you know, this is why doubt it, you know, he was saying like, you know, I like to watch fantasy, I like to watch these other genres where like, you know, very you know, royalty elites, you know, they get to make the decisions, and their actions have real consequences. And like it made me think that like a lot of these prestige dramas, and I guess this in a way this connects to like conversations we've had with Andreessen and about like these anti-hero prestige dramas are like implicitly endorsing the great man theory of history, right? Which is a kind of a Nietzschean idea that, you know, like there's the sort of, you know, more associated with the left, that events unfold due to forces outside of our control, right? Like we're sort of billiard balls moving around through this sort of systemic social structural forces, and then there's this sort of more like personal theories of history, I think more promoted by the right, where like you have individual agency and control over your life, and like all of these prestige dramas, right? Like you see like, you know, very interesting, you know, morally ambiguous characters taking action and like changing the world around them. And that was, yeah, like I linked that piece of back to the eulogies delivered about Logan,
Yes, the eulogies were
right?
that was
Yeah,
amazing.
like that Logan was like a force of nature, and like he was a vortex, right? Like everywhere he went he sucked you in, and he made things happen, and like regardless of how you feel morally one way or the other, like he, like Kendall, yeah, I thought Kendall's eulogy was a little overdrawn and a bit unrealistic, but you know, I guess for the moment it was fine, right? Because like Kendall historically has been a character who usually fumbles
Yeah,
when it comes to like public speaking or like trying to shore up support for himself. And then suddenly, you know, it was an impromptu speech, right? Like apparently this was all just sort of off the cuff. He becomes like an Aaron Sorkin character and
yeah.
is like speaking very eloquently about his dad. Yeah, but I did like the way that they handled Roman, because the show, the episode opens with Roman, you know, walking around his high rise, you know, like,
Yeah.
oh, Roman the showman, you know, about how great this eulogy is going to be, and then he just totally cracks, and I'm like, that is very fitting for his character. Kendall, that was, you know, but the eulogy, like the actual content of the eulogy was phenomenal.
Yeah. So I
Ewan's too,
imagine,
actually, the brother was great.
yeah, I mean they were those were amazing scenes, and recent um likes he would have loved. I mean, I think he's gonna watch this episode's. He's gonna be watching it, but he's gonna love it because this is what he wants. He wants the Kendall speech was the unapologetic embrace of sort of the Ubermensch, right?
Hmm.
Um, and Kendall, you know, I thought it was. I had the same thought as you about maybe it being unrealistic. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't off the top episode. Maybe like he, you know, there was a possibility that he would speak before. Like there was a discussion of who would speak. So maybe he had the outlines in his head. He was thinking about like what I would say,
Okay.
and he was just sort of there. You know, he was stumbling. He didn't have the exact words. He's like, you know, he's like life, buildings, shows, and like he sort of repeated himself 3 times. So it was realistic like that. Like it wasn't a prepared speech. It was like sort of like the ideas were there, but he bumbled
Mm.
like sort of the words and like the intonation. But yeah, I mean, it was really a defense of sort of like, yeah, when he goes, you know, there's always like a million reasons not to do things. And, you know, there's just this, you know, there's this man who's just sort of, you know, this man who just sort of acted, and like there's such a power and such a beauty in that. And he says, like, I hope it's in me. And like he says something about like, I hope it's in like our civilization or something like that, this Western
Mm.
civilization. Even Rome's speech,
Otherwise,
the
the
one he was
future will be
practicing,
bleak.
it might have been, you know what? It might, not that I think about it, it might have been like almost Rome. It might have been Rome's speech because Rome was going along the similar lines. When Rome was practicing, he was talking about the satellites that he put in the air, the fibers that he, you know, the shows that he started, the channels that he started. Right? He's presenting. It was sort of the same theme with Logan as this great builder. So maybe he had Rome's note cards. Maybe he was thinking along the same lines. Maybe they discussed it or something. But yeah, I thought that was very cool. And then the Shiv one, you know, and you know, it's like Ewan is like the representative of like liberal, like the liberal elites. Like you build something, they're just going to complain about like, oh, you know, you hurt some like, you know, frog endangered species or something, right? It's like, you know, they're not interested in the building of civilization. They're interested in sort of nitpicking what capitalism or what like a great nation does, right? And then
Mm.
Kendall comes in and like, we can give the other side, and so they're talking about giving the other side, and you think it's like about Logan, but it's also just about like this sort of liberal conservatism debate. You know, one thing I love about this show is like conservatism is much cooler in the show than I think it's become in real life. Like I wish that someone would be like, you know, we defend the builders and, you know, the people who do great things and like, you know, are just ruthless. And it's really, I think it's populism is sort of, it's become less of that.
Hmm.
But yeah, they did get sort of the other side to you and the leftist. And then Shiv was like, you know, I like what she said about the women. Like he couldn't fit a woman into his mind. The way she put it, I thought was very good. Like it was hard to
Yeah.
be a woman, you know, his daughter. He couldn't fit an entire woman in multiply. Like that's just so great. It's
Yeah.
like
That
women
was
are,
very
you know,
well done. Yeah.
things, yeah.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
all his wives and his two wives and his mistresses, right,
Oh yeah, all
are
in this
all
front pew. That was so
they
good.
Marsha and
Arranged by Caroline, the Roy kid's mother. The way that she did that was so yeah, yeah. I like her character because it's so subtle. Even the non-exchange about Shiv's pregnancy, right? Like Caroline looks down at Shiv's, could tell she's, she's pregnant and says like, "Are you okay?" And Shiv just says, "Yep." And then like they have this, this sort of chess game of like acknowledging she's pregnant without just saying it. And you can tell that Caroline wants to ask like, "Is it Tom? Like, what's going on?" And then she's like, "Oh, okay." And like they yeah, it was very very well done. Um, but yeah, the the eulogy, Ewan's eulogy, I thought was interesting. Like the way that he sort of, he set up Logan, his brother, to be like a sympathetic. Like he tells like two very like emotional and personal stories about their childhoods, about being on this ship, and they were told not to speak because the U-boats might get them, and then the parents essentially blamed Logan for their sister's death by because he thought
it was the
he
aunts. It
brought
was an aunt.
polio.
He said the aunts and uncle. So
Oh, it was the aunt and uncle.
yeah,
That's
they were
right.
staying with their aunt and uncle. I don't know, remember the exact
Right.
story, but
That's
somehow
right. Yeah.
I don't know where their parents were, if they were doing something else. But
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the implication in previous seasons, right? The implication was that Logan's uncle was abusive to him, and that's why he has the scars on his back. And then, yeah, and then Ewing goes on to like, instead of talking about, like the usual, like the isms, right? Like instead of making like direct claims about like what immoral or unethical things Logan did, it was more about like how he made the world a meaner place, right? Like Logan was a mean person, he was a cruel person, and he sort of projected his prejudices and his anger out into the world without naming specifics about like what it was, right? Like in the past, Ewan would say, he'd make remarks about like how ATN was like promoting whatever, like things about like, climate change denial or whatever. But this time it was just like a very kind of, which I guess makes sense, right? So eulogy, you're not going to call your brother a racist at his eulogy, but just like saying that Logan, like he made the world worse. And I think that is kind of how people view Fox, right? Like a lot of educated people view Fox as like
yeah,
promoting prejudices, like popular prejudices among the masses, and like making people more sort of conspiratorial and more suspicious and mistrustful. Um, yeah, so that was, yeah, and then Kendall's speech too was, yeah, that was just really, even how he said like, I hope I have some of that in me, otherwise the future is going to look very bleak. And so they were both like, kind of balanced out and good assessments, I thought, of Logan's character, and how I think like everyone feels a bit of that, right? Like in the real world, like not in the show, that like, yeah, the future does seem like, because we don't have like in the real world men like that anymore. I mean, we have a few, but I think
yeah,
generally like that kind of man is frowned upon, like the man who takes action.
yeah. I mean, what's like Ewan done with his life, right? And he's like, his politics are so yeah, it's interesting. His main motivation is not racism or sexism, right? His main motivation is climate change, right? That's his like
Hmm.
main issue. That's the issue he thinks is gonna destroy the world, right? So it's an interesting sort of like the leftism they present here. The race and the sex stuff is sort of second tier. Like it's almost an afterthought. It's I think like we talked about the vision of conservatism the show portrays compared to real life conservatism. I think liberalism now is much more identity focused than the show promotes. So yeah, it's there. These people are bigots or whatever, but it's not. I mean, the main thing is like they are anti-democracy. Like the main thing, the problem with the critique of the right, the thing left worries about is like the right is anti-democracy and like it denies climate change, right? And then it's like a third thing is like just this is amorphous hate. It's sort of like Biden. I mean, this is like what Biden would like sell as like what he would portray the Republicans as, right? Um,
Do you think
and so
that in Douthat's piece, do you think he was right when he said that that the show, like the way that he portrays conservatives is like, so on the one hand you have people like Menkin who are like ideological fanatics, and
yeah,
then you have people like the Roy kids and people like Tom and Logan too, right? who they're kind of like, I guess, like they're not ideological, right? Like they're conservative maybe temperamentally, but what they really want, and Shiv says this in the latest episode, she says like, oh, he's not, like, dad wasn't really, well, this is what Menkin says, like, with him and Logan there were always ideological sympathies, and Shiv responds like, oh, I think my dad was more about like money and winning, basically,
Yeah.
right? Like he wasn't really conservative. None of the Roy family seem to be actually politically ideological. They just care about like making money, getting rich, and expanding their influence. But actually, yeah, what Douthat said in that piece is like there are like honest to goodness, like normie Republican politicians who, like,
Yeah.
they are like, they're not fanatics, and they're not cynical opportunists. Like they believe in their values, and we don't do we like I don't think we see anyone like that. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe Connor, like, but he's kind of a
Connor,
weirdo,
yeah.
right? He's not like a representative normie Republican.
Yeah, so he's like he cares about the libertarian principles, and then he gets mad because these other conservative types, that one episode where the guy gives the sort of the eulogy at Logan's apartment, where he's like trying to make him into like a Reaganite, part of the conservative movement. So they do sort of exist, right? So you do, yeah, you're right, but they have a very, like, I think that like most people who work for Fox probably like fall into that normie conservatism, Ben, and you don't see them in the show. You're right. I think that is something that is missing. Douthat's right. That is something that's missing. Um, you do have sort of like, it's like the conservatives who care less about politics, who just want to watch TV, who just like have an instinctual dislike of wokeness and this other like weird new stuff. Yeah, like that's perspective. I think Tom is sort of like that. Tom is just like, he'll laugh at a socialist, or I imagine him laughing at like somebody who's like claiming racism or sexism. I don't know if he does this a lot, but you see he rolls his eyes at like these kind of things. Also doesn't like sort of like the far right things that he thinks are weird. Um, but yeah, you're right. That is. I'm trying to think
And
where
Greg
is.
is an interesting one. Greg kind of started out, I think, more on the left, and then I think Greg is portrayed now as just kind of an opportunist, right? Like
Yeah.
even though he's trying to angle to get an introduction to Menkin, and it's so good. Like, I remember at one point, one of our conversations, I predicted that Greg was like going to be a serious candidate to be like the actual successor. Like Greg, like they've done such a good job of like
Yeah.
showing Greg's like slow gradual rise in his ascent, but he's still Greg, right? Like he's still
When did
kind
you
of
when
like a
did you think
bumbling
this?
idiot.
How late were you thinking this?
I think this was season 2, maybe. I don't remember
Okay.
which, when, but like, because it was just, it was like I thought that Greg was going to be like a clown the entire time, but he's actually, he's like, if you compare him to season 1, Greg, he's actually done very well for himself, but he's
Yeah.
still like kind of a bumbling fool. Um, like I mean, I don't know if we can, I guess we can jump into it, like who you think will be like who will actually inherit the
Yeah.
role, right? Like who's going to be the actual successor? I think that this latest episode, this is the penultimate episode. Um, Kendall came out on too high a note. Like the way that this show
Yeah.
is, and a lot of these kinds of shows, like there's a lot of emotional whiplash where they set you up to think that, like when someone's at their lowest point and the character's at their lowest point, like the next episode or the next season, suddenly they're sort of climbing up, and when they're at the highest point, the next episode or the next scene is suddenly they're on the descent. Kendall came out looking pretty good, I think, like with the eulogy, with forming his, non-collaboration with Hugo, right? Like he even says to Hugo, like, this isn't a collaboration, like you're my dog and the scraps will be millions. And Hugo is like, woof woof.
Yeah.
And then Shiv, she is appointed basically CEO by Matson, right? Of the company. Like he basically tells her that's he gives that the green light. So Shiv's kind of coming out of the episode on top. Roman didn't end the episode very well. But Tom is an interesting one. I thought Tom's exchange with Shiv toward the end, when he shows up at the party and they're talking about how Tom hasn't slept in a while, and he starts to cry but at the beginning he was like, what did Shiv say? Shiv said something like, you would have never skipped my father's funeral when he was still alive. And Tom responds, well, if you hadn't noticed, like your father has much less influence now. And so Tom chose work over the
He said he lost
funeral.
influence, and he said he lost influence in the last few days, which is funnier way to phrase it.
Yeah, yeah. And so Tom chose to work over the funeral. And it reminds me of in the I think this was in the pilot episode in season was this season? Yeah, where Logan's birthday. It was Logan's birthday, the very first episode of the show. Logan basically gives Kendall, he condemns Kendall basically for choosing to go to his birthday instead of working. Right? To Logan, you should put work and success above your family and above all else. And Tom did that. And so now I'm thinking like maybe this was supposed to be, it's kind of a stretch, but I'm thinking that. And then also generally Tom just seems to be like the most competent out of all of them. He's the
Yeah.
only one you ever see doing anything operational in terms of actual work at Waystar Royco, right? Like the kids you never actually see them do any work. Tom is actually like, he knows how the business runs. So I'm like slightly leaning towards Tom.
Yeah, and one point they do mention that like the news, I think he handles like the opinion shows, the primetime lineup or something, and they were saying it was doing well under him. So it was supposed to be the
Mm.
idea was that he was actually doing well. So yeah, it's like Kendall versus Shiv seems like the finals. We have one episode left. I think Shiv coming out on top would be sort of a cool girl boss sort of victory after like sort of this man's world where she's a woman and she's the afterthought the whole time. And now she's pregnant. Like her womanhood is like front and center.
Okay.
And she just
Yeah.
takes over at the moment with like, when she's having a baby. She's, oh yeah, I'll just have the vanity Caesar cesarean section. And then,
36 hours of maternity leave.
yeah, yeah. Although the other thing you can imagine is that like Menkin is like too sexist for a woman CEO, and like so they make it Tom with Shiv the power behind the scenes. That seems like
Oh,
they were
interesting.
there was a reconciliation at the end. So that seems like I don't know. It would be sort of unbelievable that like Menkin could be like become the president, but he's like so sexist he can't like stand a woman CEO. That seems like a little much, but like maybe I thought it was much for him to like go up to her and talk about like his insulting of her like in those terms. I thought was a little much. So maybe he's just a full on sexist and he won't accept women anywhere, which would be sort of funny. So yeah, that could happen. Yeah, I think so I'm wondering. So like everything has been like this entire season, I think has been like each episode has been like a day or something like that, or like two
Hmm.
days or something. And so like if it's just like one more day, then like we're not gonna have like the presidential thing settled, right? So that'll be sort of a big I imagine that they will show like a montage of like what happens after. That's what I imagine will happen. Like they'll show the next day or two, like the succession, and then they'll show the montage, and it'll be like Tom in his office with like Greg as his right hand man or something like that, and like Kendall in rehab again, and Rome jumped off a
Hmm.
bridge. I don't know, whatever. They're gonna, and you'll know who was president, and you'll see Shiv's baby being born. And that'll be sort of how it ends because there has to be a sort of like a montage or something because like there's so many loose like the baby thing is not going to be figured out in one day. The what happens to
Hmm.
the baby, what happens with Shiv and Tom's relationship is not going to be figured out in one day. What happens with the presidential election is not going to be figured out in one day or 2 days. And so like I think we need the answers for this to sort of be
I mean,
satisfying.
they could. I mean, this isn't the kind of show that would do that, but they could like start the next episode like months in the future, right?
Well,
Where
they
like
haven't.
like Shiv has been the CEO for a while. She has the baby. Mencken is now the
Yeah,
president. There's still, like Kendall's still trying to make moves, or Kendall is like kind of the tentative CEO of Waystar Royco or something. Like I could see like
I
them.
have to.
Oh,
I
maybe
have to
maybe they'll
look. I
do.
have to look. I have to look back. But in the way they've done this entire season,
Yeah.
I think it's just like a day at a time. And I think that item might have actually been like that's pretty much been the way they've done the entire show. So I read something that the entire timeline of Succession is supposed to be 1 year. Like in the first season, you have Logan's birthday, and then
Oh
like the
yeah.
last season, you have another Logan's birthday, and it's all
Yeah.
supposed to be 1 year. So they've been doing this very compressed timeline. Like maybe between seasons, like a few months passes. That never happened. Like they can do whatever they want in the final episode, but like no, we've got to see the boardroom showdown. Like they're setting us up. They can't just fast forward a few months. We've got to know who's going to win. Kendall versus Shiv and Matson. Like I don't think you can skip over that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that has to be. Well, it's all building up towards some kind of a finale, some kind of showdown. Um, yeah, that'll be interesting. And then, yeah, if they're gonna do anything with Matsson's character too, I've actually been like Mattson has been like a surprisingly entertaining character. Like he's like the what is it? Alexander Skarsgård is the actor's name. Isn't was he the Northman? He's the Northman, right? Like he played that guy.
Well, he was
I
played
think
that
so.
guy
Let me.
seemed a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
He seemed pretty skinny
Northman.
for.
I
He
think
seems
that is
he
him,
must have really
Alexander
bulked.
Skarsgård. It is
He
Amleth.
must have
Yeah,
been. He
yeah.
must have bulked up. Wow.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure he had to go through some grueling training. So it's that guy. And I didn't like I'd only ever seen him in like either like so there's that role, right? Like kind of an action role. And I've seen him as like the handsome husband in I think it was Big Little Lies on another HBO show. But to see him as like a kind of a goofball, like almost comedic character, like even in the latest episode where like Greg comes up to him and Matson just like looks up to him with like this goofy smile. He's like, "Hey, sexy," like just like a very like Greg, right? Like just a very random nickname for him. Like no reason why he should call him that.
Yeah.
But his line delivery and his like the way he walks too, like he plays like this sort of super smart kind of bumbling um like yeah, irreverent tech bro, like very
Well,
well, I think.
It's Elon Musk, right? It's
You,
Elon
do you think he's
Musk.
supposed to be Elon?
Let me see. He's supposed to be a
Yeah.
agglomeration of Elon Musk, and there was
Oh,
supposed to be there's
interesting.
another tech guy. Here's
Okay.
according to Google. If you just Google, Lucas Matson, and one of the things pop up, people ask what is based on. It says, agglomeration of Spotify co-founder Daniel Ek. I don't know who that is, and a little bit of Elon Musk. That's what according to Vanity Fair. Let me see what this
Oh, I
Daniel Ek
see.
guy looks like. Do you know Daniel Ek? I
I
don't know.
don't know. Co-founder and
He
CEO of
looks like he's like a
Spotify.
bald headed. He looks like he's actually a Swedish billionaire entrepreneur.
Oh,
He sort of
interesting.
looks
All
like
right.
he sort of
Okay.
looks like a smart aleck, but he's
Yeah.
bald, which is different.
Okay.
And yeah. Uh, so
Did he
yeah, he
also
is a
have a like a Me Too thing? So in the show, right? Ebba, uh, was it like it's been a couple episodes since we've talked, but
yeah
there was the scene where Matson's talking to Ebba, like one of the women in his entourage, and he basically says she has tenure in the entourage despite them not getting along because apparently she accused him of some kind of sexual misconduct, and now like she and him, like she basically sort of earned her way or like blackmailed her way into that spot. um and so this is why Ebba is feeding information to Kendall about what's going on with
yeah
Shiv and Matson, right?
yeah
So yeah, that's like another interesting sort
yeah.
of
I just googled
layer
Daniel
to the
Ek Me
Matson
Too,
character.
and it seems like seems like a normal liberal who just says I'm very he's like supportive of Me Too, but Elon Musk does have these sort of these sexual harassment allegations surrounding him. So yeah,
Oh,
it's
that's
a combination of the two.
yeah.
And he's sort of a leftist in his politics, right? He calls Menkin a Nazi, and he says America. I was annoyed when he's like, "Oh, you guys didn't count black people, so you're only
Oh
been a
yeah,
democracy
yeah. You've only
for
have
50
you
years."
have the same. Your democracy is as old as the one in Botswana.
Yeah, yeah, not as old as Botswana. Yeah, so
Yeah, which is
he's like,
like that made me wonder. Like, is the democracy in Sweden? Were they? Is he Swedish in the show, Matson?
yeah,
Like, is democracy like whatever, like political equality, like that kind of democracy? How long has that existed in Sweden? Like, could black people and women and whoever, like, when was that? I wonder.
I don't think they had any black people,
I
right?
know that's
Sweden
what I like.
democracy.
Did they? I wonder how that would have worked. Like say a black guy shows up in Sweden in 1950,
So
like would they have let him
1921,
vote?
they had women's suffrage introduced in 1921, much later than the not much later than the U.S. The U.S. had the constitutional. U.S. states were some of them in the late 1800s. All right.
Yeah.
They said they've adhered to parliamentarianism. So I think they have a claim on
Okay.
a pretty long
Okay.
democracy.
So longer
Uh,
democracy than the U.S.
I mean,
According
I
to
don't.
the
Yeah,
Matson's
well, the blacks
definition.
are what 10% of the population. People, they exclude women, and women are a higher percentage of the population. So blacks, and it was state by state, right? It wasn't all black people.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a federal system. I think people are nitpicking. Yeah, I think the U.S. was a democracy in the 1960s. Not,
A controversial claim, Richard.
yeah,
The U.S. is an older democracy than Sweden. I don't know.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
you have
yeah.
to. You have the federal right to vote, right? But you didn't have like the state, like you had the states had the rights, and it wasn't as big a portion of the population as women, who are half the population, and we just generally consider democracies even when they don't let women vote. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's whatever. That's a sort of just annoying liberal thing to say. But he's like liberal. He's like he reminds
Kind of
me of
makes
a.
sense.
He reminds me of like a 2000s, early 2000s liberal. All those people who are like who's anti woke, anti PC, might sexually harass women, but also like just has like
Yeah,
thoughtlessly has liberal ideals. And I don't think a lot of those people exist anymore. I think all those tech guys either
yeah,
became really right wing or they just became full on liberals and wouldn't like sexually harass women or anything anymore. So I think he's sort of a throwback in that way.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, well, he's also like European, and maybe like their attitudes too around sexual interactions and
Yeah.
encounters. That may
But
also
that's no
be
Sweden is like
complicated.
Sweden is like the epicenter of feminism. So I don't think
Is
like
that?
that
Oh
would be
yeah,
okay in
that's okay.
Sweden.
Yeah, they have like very strict gender equality norms. Okay, yeah, I could see that. I mean, yeah, like generally, like in the Me Too, a lot of the Me Too allegations were there any high profile conservatives in entertainment or media? I mean, Bill Cosby, arguably, was he
You're
a
missing a big. You're
conservative?
missing a big one. I mean, you're missing a big one.
Well, Trump, right, right.
Well, no, no, no.
Well,
But, well, I mean, yeah, but
yeah, yeah.
uh, no, but like ATN, Roger Ailes,
Oh, yeah,
Bill
yeah, yeah.
O'Reilly,
That's
right? Bill
true.
O'Reilly, and then
O'Reilly
Roger Ailes.
was. You're
Yeah,
right. Yeah, a lot of those. Okay,
O'Reilly
yeah,
was before. O'Reilly was actually before the Me Too, and Ailes, I
yeah,
think, maybe was at the
yeah,
front end of that.
yeah.
But yeah, the Ailes accusations were really bad.
Logan
Um,
Roy didn't get, at least within the universe of the show.
no,
Interestingly, I mean, he
yeah, he
had
just,
like, he had his four women in the pew,
yeah,
uh, and
yeah.
during his funeral. But he, at least to the show, yeah, there were never any, like, not even insinuations
Yeah.
that Logan was,
Well, he's old. I mean, by the time we get
improper.
to him, he's really old, and he just grabs the first woman that that woman that comes by him. Was the first woman next to him. He just
Carrie.
he just goes with. Yeah, I think like he's I think he's too old at that point to be too energetic of a Me Too guy. I think he's focusing mostly on his work. Um, yeah, this is good. This is going somewhere. Where is the What do you think about Shiv? What do you think about Shiv drinking in front of Tom? What do you think about that?
I mean, that just seems like another ploy, right? To like get under his skin. Like everything in this show is like that, right? Like Shiv even says when her mother, like Caroline, says like, why didn't you tell me? She didn't even say, why didn't you tell me you're pregnant? She just, why didn't you tell me? And we're supposed to, just she's basically asking that. And then Shiv responds, I have to be careful what I tell you because you might use it against me. Like this
Mhm.
whole family, the whole show, like the whole Roy clan is like everyone is constantly gathering information. At the end of the episode, Kendall says something along the lines of, he's talking to Hugo. He says, life is whatever, life isn't fair, life is contingencies,
Mhm.
and the people who love you are also trying to, I know we're trying not to swear on this show, but they're trying
Yeah,
to f
trying to
you,
ask you. Yeah.
right? And so that's like that's this whole show, right? So this scene, it's like I don't even know, like the way that the characters are, they're so well written and so like a product of this family that when Shiv takes a drink, it may not even be conscious, right? Like she may not be like consciously thinking, let me mess with Tom a little bit and like take this drink of alcohol. It's like it's instinctive. I know that if I drink this, it's gonna mess with him, but it's not a conscious thought, right? Like that's just how like they're operating at that level, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The familial dynamics are very good. I think I might have seen Shiv drinking after being pregnant when Tom wasn't around. I think I might have seen that too. So it just might be her. I don't know, like subconscious. Like he
I
just
don't
loves
think
to
it's gonna
stick his
do
tongue.
anything. I think like
Yeah,
not,
I don't think so
I
either. She doesn't
you
get
can have a little.
sloppy drunk. She takes like a
You can
sip.
have a little
But
wine. Didn't
yeah,
women used to drink like a lot and
yeah,
like before anyone knew?
I think it's one of those. Yeah, those. I think it's one of those fake
It's kind
pieces
of
of advice that they
exaggerated.
tell women. Yeah, that you have to really worry about it. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, it seems like her and I mean that was a very nasty fight they had on the balcony. It was sort of
Oh, that
unrealistic. They
was.
closed the balcony, but that must have been very soundproof for like nobody to hear because they're yelling at each other at the top of their lungs, and the whole party is there, and apparently nobody sees it. But yeah, that was like, she calls him like a hick or something like that. Like he's just sort of like from like a lower background.
You're a conservative hick or
Yeah,
something. Like she even
yeah,
throws politics in there, which was
yeah.
yeah.
She has politics or low
They
status. Low
all of
status.
these, yeah. Tom gets, yeah. Tom's in it. So in real life, the actor Matthew McFadden, he's British. He's a British actor, but he plays this sort of like middle America. Remember the guy who Shiv? I don't remember if Shiv actually slept with him. Who's the guy who works for Gil, the handsome dude
Yeah,
who like she had a
his
thing
name
with?
is. Uh, I don't remember, but I think she
Yeah,
does sleep with him. I think she does sleep
yeah,
with him
yeah.
pretty
But
regularly.
he, you remember, like, I think season 1 or season 2, he refers to Tom. He's like, you're with this guy. He's like this corn-fed basic from Hockey Town. Like,
Yeah,
it's so like, and it's like he's like dripping with disdain. And so like Tom, and so like this is why Tom is who he is, right? He's so concerned with image and like trying to curry favor with Logan. He was willing to go to jail for Logan. He's like trying so hard. I think this is a sort of in a way, Tom is like the most relatable character. He's kind of the audience surrogate. I guess Greg to a lesser degree, but he like started as just like a kind of like a regular guy who managed to win the affections of the daughter of the family and like
yeah,
get a job in the firm and climb his way up through mostly through hard work and shrewd decision making rather than the Roy kids like Kendall and Roman especially. Like they show like signs of promise, but like
yeah.
ultimately you're not going to trust them to like run anything,
Especially
right?
Roman, like Kendall. It's hard for me to see like his. He's like, like Rome seems to be high variance. He seems to be very good at like getting deals and like but also will like just like break down and like have like terrible things happen to him. Yeah, the way he broke down, I didn't expect him to break down at the funeral. That was unexpected.
Mm,
And then they're sharing the clip. They're saying like it's getting passed around on Twitter or something like the sound, the mic like catches him like like wailing, and they're all like, oh, that's bad.
the Grim
It made
Weeper.
me see. Yeah, so like his weird sexual stuff, combined with his like, it's like he was like
Yeah, his
hitting on
coffee.
Shiv like all the time, like when they go to the when they're going to the funeral, and then he like talks about having sex on the coffin with Marsha, and it's just like it seems like it's so clear now that all that stuff is like a coping mechanism. He's like he's like got this like emotional like instability, he's sort of emotionally stunted, and that's just like how he deals with it, just like being
Yeah, the
like outside
characters.
that relationship.
Yeah, even back in season 1, Roman accused Kendall of locking him in a dog cage with a doggy bowl, and
Yeah.
then Kendall responded, "You asked us to do that to you. Like you enjoyed doing it, and you asked me to do it." And so they have these different memories
No, and
of
then
their
they go to
childhood.
Connor. Wait, no, I think Connor tells them they go to Connor
Okay,
to like
yeah,
settle it, and Connor says you wanted it or something like that.
you
Like Connor,
wanted
like remember
it.
like, he wanted, yeah, Connor like he liked it. Yeah, he remember Connor remembers it clearly. While
Yeah.
so maybe it was like it's just his nature rather than
Yeah,
I
which
don't like
makes sense to me. Kendall is like you could like the scene that always sticks out of my mind, like the dynamic between Kendall and Roman is when Logan punches Roman and Kendall immediately jumps up and like points his finger in Logan's face and says don't touch him. And you can tell that like that exact interaction has probably happened a lot in their lives when they were growing up, right? Where like Logan uses Roman as like his he like he takes out his anger on him, and then Kendall like steps in, and then I think even the funeral there was that dynamic where, in a way, Roman like Roman basically folded, and Kendall had to step in and rescue him again and deliver the eulogy for him, and so Roman is like like high variance is like a good. I mean, even Kendall's kind of high variance too with his
yeah
addiction, right?
he
Like
breaks
if
down.
Kendall didn't have his addiction issues, like Kendall would actually be like probably a decent heir,
I don't think
but
he has the ceiling the Roman has. I think Roman can like really get to, like when he gets to Matson. I think that was all Roman's doing.
yeah, that's
I don't know.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know if Kendall has that in him. I mean, Logan tells him straight up, like when he agrees to veto, you just don't have it. You're not a killer at some point, and he
Mm,
never says that to Roman. I think it's interesting when like an episode or two ago when Lucas says to Shiv, like when they're just like hanging out, oh, you're like your dad. You could take a joke, right? The idea is
mm,
sort of that, this is sort of a hint that she's actually the one who's most like, and
oh,
maybe she is the most. Maybe like it's just the sexism. It's just holding her
mm.
back, right? You don't see the big flaws in her. Maybe you
Mm.
don't see the brilliant. Yeah, I don't know. She doesn't strike me as like brilliant
She
or
doesn't
like
seem
doing
that.
great things, but she doesn't have the
Yeah.
flaws at the same. Maybe this is male versus female
That's
high
true.
variance and versus
Right.
less risky,
Greater male
right? Maybe
variance hypothesis at work in the show.
yeah, within the family. Yeah, I don't know. Are we supposed to think Shiv is like? actually brilliant and talented. I don't know. Like we know she's not as screwed up as the other. She doesn't like have like she doesn't go into rehab or anything. Um,
Yeah.
I don't
She
know.
doesn't have like weird sexual hangups. I mean, she likes to play games. She's clearly smart, but like, yeah. Well, you also don't see her in a position, right? Because like Logan never gave her any like serious role within the company to like shine. But I guess she was like she kind of whatever made it on her own as a political strategist and
Yeah, we
seems
don't have
like
like we don't know if she was any good. I mean,
capable.
we don't have. I don't, I'm trying to think. Do we have any indication? Like it wasn't like everyone's like, oh, we have to get Shiv. She's like known as the greatest political strategist for our generation. Like I never saw anything like
Yeah,
that,
that's
right?
yeah. Whereas Tom, yeah, like I think Tom is capable and competent, and actually, yeah, Tom also doesn't have any. Does he have any serious flaws or weaknesses that
No,
could
it's a
be
weird
exploited?
masochistic relationship with his
Well,
wife,
I
I
mean,
guess.
that's yeah,
His
yeah, yeah.
servile
Well,
nature,
so
yeah,
personal life.
yeah,
Well, although can your professional and personal life be
yeah, yeah.
be separated? Um,
No, but
but so yeah,
it's part of his professional like the way he. Well, maybe this is a professional strength. The way he'd like do anything for Logan, like he'll play the politics. Maybe this is a strength. Maybe this is a personal
he was
weakness
willing to
for
go to jail,
LA.
right? Like he was really, like literally willing to go to prison for Logan, like that level of loyalty. Yeah, so he is kind of a like a punching bag for Shiv. Yeah, yeah, like Tom's like sort of like kicking down. What is it like? Yeah, like sort of like
Kissing up.
receiving
Yeah,
abuse. Yeah, it was kissing up and kicking down. Um, which makes Tom like a one of the more sort of complex and interesting characters. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm still leaning towards Tom being the ultimate success somehow, or maybe it'll be like what you said, right? Where like Tom gets appointed CEO, but Shiv is actually the for sexist reasons they decide not to. They'll be like a power couple.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Them as
could
a
see
power couple.
that.
Yeah, I think it has to be Shiv. Shiv never has the moment. Like Kendall has like the moment. He's like the successor for a while. Rome seems to be the closest to uh, his father near the end. Shiv is never brought in. She is never like his number one. She's always sort of brushed aside. She's always trying to get that approval. And so for her to take it now, I think would be an interesting ending. Yeah, Kendall just takes it and he becomes like ruthless and like conquers all. I don't know. That could happen, but I don't know. Seems a little
Mm,
bit seems less likely. Seems like a less interesting sort of twist at the end than Shiv taking it. And
yeah.
is Rome completely? Could Rome do anything at this point? I don't know.
That would be the most surprising to me. I mean, maybe with the exception of Greg, but I don't think Greg is really in the running at this
No,
point.
you got to get off
Of
this Greg as the C.
but
Yeah,
I think among the serious competitors or candidates, Roman would be the most surprising. Which I guess like in a way, right? It's an argument in his favor. These kinds of shows often like to pull off these sort of surprise endings, but yeah, Roman, I just don't see it happening for him. I don't know. Maybe my the recency bias, right? Like his collapse at the eulogy, and then his reckless behavior, trying to, whatever, trying to get into it with the
Another
protesters.
possibility, right? Lucas somehow gets in, screws over Shiv, right? It could be Lucas, like Lucas or Menkin can somehow be like seen as the person who ends up on. Maybe Menkin like decides that ATN is pearl feed and wants people reading books and not watching TV, and so he just destroys
He
all
doesn't
cable
like it.
news.
He
Yeah,
doesn't like ATN. It's a pudding pop for the nursing
yeah,
home.
see, that's impossible. You couldn't, you could be that kind of intellectual, but you can't be like a political guy who really just instinctually hates TV and likes, reading or whatever. That's not what wins elections.
No, no, no. A Republican president could never openly hate Fox
Yeah,
News, right?
yeah.
Like even privately. I
Even
think like you
secretly, I
have
don't think
to
he gets secretly. I could
even
feel like he's
secret.
secretly boxes. Yeah,
Like you have to begrudgingly, even secretly, you have to begrudgingly say like, yeah, Fox has like an important role in the ecosystem of right wing media or
no, you
something.
have to be brain. I
Yeah,
think you have to be brain melded with Fox. That's the thing. I don't think you can even
yeah,
like do it. I don't think you can even like pretend. Like if you pretend, like it'll come out, right? I think you have to be like
yeah,
Trump, who literally just watches TV all day and like has
yeah.
strong opinions on Don Lemon and what he did the other night, right? Like
Okay.
that's why Trump is their choice. He's the most
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
voter. He's just watching TV.
Are
He's not
you
reading anything.
all in on Trump as the nominee for 24?
I've been saying that. I'm so proud. I said that before he lost the 2020 election. I said if Trump loses, he'll be the 2024. I stuck with it during January 6th.
Yeah.
People thought he would actually like win a conviction of impeachment. Like people thought if
Yeah.
like the Republicans could convict impeachment, he would have been banned from running. I say no, they wouldn't convict him of impeachment. And yeah, everything is really backing that up. Like he's getting more and more confident in that view. Now DeSantis, I think, is announcing like this week. Tim Scott just announced. I think DeSantis is supposed to announce like today or tomorrow when we're taping this. So like but like I don't know why anything would change. I've seen these DeSantis clips of these awkward exchanges he has in like New Hampshire or Iowa. I don't see what's going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I'm basically with you that Trump will be the nominee. I mean, I've seen the polling, and as far as like who, like if he'll take out Biden, or who knows, maybe it'll be a President Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But I think like Trump, like it'll be a different election, right? 2020, COVID, and all this, like they couldn't, like Trump couldn't hold rallies, and Biden's slowing down, right? Like
Yeah.
2020 in a way was an advantage for Biden because he didn't have to go out and shake hands and kiss babies and hold
Well,
large
I'm gonna put
political
this.
gatherings.
Yeah.
So
So I'm gonna put this. I'm gonna tweet this. Like I was gonna tweet this today. I'm gonna tweet it. I'll announce it now, and the tweet will be out by the time people see this. I think that it's gonna be Trump, the nominee. Tim Scott, who just announced, will be his vice president. And then you have the two most powerful. There's two cults in American politics: the
Tim
Trump
Scott.
cult and the Black cult. And you have them on one ticket. That's it. That's
The
unbeatable.
black cult. What is the black cult? I know
The
Tim Scott is
liberals,
black.
like, you can't criticize black people. You have to, like, every institution has to change to let more of them, more of them in. The affirmative action,
Do
the
you
crime
think
thing,
Tim
right?
Scott would accept I guess he would. I
Why
mean,
wouldn't
yeah,
he? Why wouldn't he?
yeah,
90% of politicians, 90% of politicians
yeah.
would,
If you
and
get
he's not
tapped to
attacked.
be the
He's not.
VP,
And then, like, it's not like all black people will vote Republicans, but there will be it's going to be much harder to attack Tim Scott than it's going to be to attack your typical black Republican. So
yeah,
I think
interesting.
I think it's going to be Trump and Tim Scott, and it's going to be extremely formidable. I think the Democrats are
Trump
in for it.
Scott versus Biden Harris, and
Yeah.
we'll get to see a Tim Scott Kamala Harris
Oh,
debate.
that'll be fun. That'll
That'll be interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Tom Scott is so inoffensive to people, and Kamala is sort of really offensive to people, and it's just going to be a good. And Trump is just going to run. Sort of, I'm really becoming more convinced that. Well, anyways, that's a different
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah.
We have one more
Yeah.
episode of Succession left. Anything else you want to sort of flag before we go, Rob?
Nope, I think we covered a lot of ground here. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the finale, the series finale.
Yeah. Okay, we'll be back here next week to talk about it. All right. Thanks, Rob.
Yep, see it.